Please welcome Gavin Jackson, Managing Director UK and Ireland at Amazon Web Services.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to AWS Transformation Day 2018. This is the second time we've run an event in this format, actually in this very room, and it's not your typical AWS technology deep dive today. We're going to be talking at a slightly different altitude. We're going to be talking about transformation. We're going to be talking about change and the observations and the trends that we see, which means that businesses are going to have to change and transition to a completely different operating model and how IT is aligned to that operating model. Now, one of the big questions that I like to ask customers, and I see a lot of customers on my travels, is if you could change one thing, what would it be? And it's amazing how consistent, actually, the results that you get back, the same answers time and time again. And it's captured really well in this quote from a real-life CEO of a UK headquartered manufacturing company, multinational, who said, if we can go back to day one, we would make ourselves systemically innovative. If we could go back to day one, we would make ourselves systemically innovative. I just think that's such a powerful statement and such a powerful kind of assessment of what we hear time and time again from our customers, in that it's almost easier to imagine going back to the start than it is to actually transform, which I think is half the battle here. And so it's also very well aligned to how our founder and CEO, Jeff Bezos, thinks about the culture at Amazon. And he says that there are day one companies and there are day two companies. And day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by painful decline, and finally death. So on that cheery note, have a great day. I'll see you later. But of course, what Jeff actually means is that change is perpetual motion. It happens every day. It never stops. And customers are always going to want better. So really, what day one means is optimizing for customers and optimizing for better, and not getting stuck in a number of the sort of the pitfalls and the traps that you see from day two companies typically. So today is really about giving you some ideas and even a pathway to how you should think about culture, how you should think about the organizational structure of your business, how you think about the operating model, and then finally the actual technology platform itself, to become a day one business that is systemically innovative, but without having to invent a time machine to go back to day one in order to make that happen. So why is this important? This is a quote for financial services, but it actually is a lot broader than this. It's just a quote I like. It's from McKinsey & Co., and it said that banks aren't being disrupted by fintech companies. They're being disrupted by customer expectations. And that's absolutely correct. Expectations have gone through the roof. It's just being served by a multitude of different companies now. And we're experiencing what I refer to as the great unbundling of the world, where we see sort of thousands of day one companies that are picking apart at the seams and at the edges, parts of the incumbent businesses that live in that space, one business process, one app, and one customer experience at a time. And it's happening at exponential rates of change. And of course, it's not just banks that are being disrupted in this way. It's all industries, it's all companies in all walks of life, where insurgent companies are kind of exploiting underserved or sort of latent customer dissatisfaction and doubling down at the rate of change that has never been seen before. And oftentimes it's too late then for the incumbent companies to sort of keep up. And of course, you can cross out banks, as I've suggested here. You can cross out banks and put any company in there. You can cross out the pretext of fintech, and you can put your sort of pretext in there for ad tech or martech or travel tech or game tech or health tech or you name it tech. It's happening everywhere. The world as we know it is being broken apart and reassembled in the form of software. And software changes at a very different rate to the physical world, like factories. And we refer to this as the accelerated metabolism of business. It's where industries and business sort of adopt the speed of change that technology has and has an exponential curve. So really, what companies need to ask themselves is, what kind of factory do you need to build when software is eating the world? And we think that it's software factories that you need to build, and that they're in the cloud, where the production line workers are the builders and the DevOps teams, and the machines and the robots and the AI and the data and the infrastructure technology platform is all in the cloud with AWS. So what kind of attributes does this new software factory world enable? Well, the first thing is it allows for exponentially more experiments. If you think about it, today, before the cloud, you have to take the whole round trip on a business case for any kind of new idea. You have to go to your finance teams to get approval for sign-off on things that you just can't imagine the size and the scope of the project being. You have to go through procurement loops for hardware and software. You have to play the perpetual guessing game as to how big it's going to be. Is it going to be a hit? Is it going to be a miss? And so actually it turns out just to be too hard. And so experiment rates go down. And in the cloud, the cost of experimentation is virtually zero, and it happens in an instance. And this freedom then allows you to exponentially add more experiments, which leads to greater successes. You kill your failures really fast. You double down and auto-scale on your successes. And in doing so, you give yourself a dramatic competitive advantage. The London School of Economics actually did a study on this very point. And they said that companies that deliver a DevOps operating model in the AWS cloud have a between 500 and 2,000% faster time to market than those that don't. That's a 5x to 20x advantage by deploying DevOps in the AWS cloud. It's just dramatic. And speed matters when software is king, and it really is one of the key differences between day one and day two company mentalities. But at the same time, the cloud is also having a profound effects on the technologies around it, the other megatrends that we see. If you think about machine learning and AI, for instance, these are essentially just massive compute and data problems that we're trying to solve. And they used to be just this sort of domains of research universities like MIT or Cambridge or something like that. But because of the cloud and because of the AWS tooling that we're giving to people, it's now available to anyone and everyone. And so now everyone has the opportunity to use machine learning to automate their processes, to add sort of precision to their data models and their data problems, to build new AI interfaces with voice and with computer vision and other such programs, and to just build and reinvent the customer experience. It's now available to everybody. According to PwC, AI will add £232 billion worth of GDP in the UK over the next 10 years. And according to IDC, 40% of all digital transformations will be aided by artificial intelligence. These are really important business signals that you should capture as part of that change that's happening. And I can tell you that today is the day that you should get on board with all of those. Now, of course, the world built in software is a full-contact multiplayer game. It's no longer about the big sort of incumbent company versus the big rival. It's scores of insurgent companies that are attacking from all different angles. And that's because in the cloud, the barriers to entry to start and run a new business are so low. You can be up and running and build a new business attacking just a weaker point within the customer experience and be up and running very quickly. But the same is true for incumbent companies, for enterprises, to reinvent the customer experience. So it really is a level playing field. It's about who is going to capture that latent dissatisfaction with customers first and fastest. So it really is about survival of the fittest, the fastest, and the most adaptable. And that really does mean that day one companies have an outsized advantage. I always say that you can't work off a bad diet, right? That you can't exercise digital and then carry on consuming high-calorie technology. Right? You have to find a way of shedding the pounds if you're going to continue to be fast and agile and to capture those new customer experiences. In that same study with the London School of Economics, they showed that companies that are sort of decluttering from the previous world of sort of legacy technology have up to a 90% operating cost advantage over those that don't. And that when you add the kind of 5 to 20x time to market improvements that you can get because of the cloud, the absolute output, the absolute productivity gain that most companies get is on average 20% higher than their peers. This really is game-changing, almost table stakes, however, for business tomorrow. But just as fast as day one companies are sort of progressing at an exponential rate, it actually has the reverse effect on incumbents that stand still. And you can start to see this when you compare, and we're going to get into more detail along these lines in one of the next talks, but you can start to see this when you compare some of the attributes of day one companies and day two companies. So I'll give you, for instance, so day one companies, you really kind of focus on the customer problem they're trying to solve, and they really index on achieving better. And once they've found better, they try and disprove what better looks like, and they try and find better again. Whereas day two companies tend to sort of double down and profit for the long term as to what they've got, and they forget oftentimes that the customer journey is changing, and they don't necessarily always change with it. You know, day one companies make high velocity decisions, and they iterate and change very, very quickly. Day two companies tend to make high quality decisions, and it's all data driven, but it just takes too long to get those decisions passed and through various different parts of the organization. And then the customer expectation has moved on, and it's too late. Your day one companies do everything they can to harvest as much power from data as they possibly can, to learn from their customers, to index on what they're going to, and anticipate what they're going to want next. Whereas day two companies have what I refer to as a data phobia, right? That's caused by the fear of security breaches or of regulatory compliance or some other thing that builds a fear, a phobia almost, as to how you can use data to your advantage. And then finally, day one companies are voracious consumers of new technology, and they see it as giving them the edge. Right? They want to get their business into software as fast as they can. They want to hit those exponential curves of progress that you get when companies and industries move into technology. And day two companies, they tend to fear some of those changes, and oftentimes are surrounded by, frankly, old guard technology companies who profit from keeping you standing still. The good news is you don't need to invent a time machine to go back to day one. Day one starts today. And just to prove that, I'd like to bring out my first guest for today. I'd like to invite the Director for Cloud Practice at KPMG, Chris Astley. Chris. Good to see you. How's it going? Okay, Chris. So do you want to tell me just a little bit about you and your team and what your team do at KPMG?
Sure, absolutely. So hi, Chris Astley. I lead the cloud practice, and I always think it's a bit of a weird term, actually, to say I lead a cloud practice. What would a cloud practice be? I'm definitely not an auditor. I've figured that out from being at KPMG. But what I'm actually here to do now for KPMG is to grow a capability for our business, to enable the business to transform themselves through leveraging cloud. And what I think has been really interesting for us is what we've achieved over the past couple of years. The last 2 years, we've tripled the size of the team. Both years have gone from 10 to 30, then 30 to 90. And we anticipate similar level of growth this year. So the demand really is there for the kind of things we do, which is amazing, I think.
Yeah. So why did KPMG feel the need to do any kind of transformation at all?
Well, for us, it was all about agility. It really was. We had an on-premises facility that was failing us. It didn't allow us to iterate fast enough. And we had genuine failures in that facility as well. And we saw cloud as a way to solve both of those problems. It really did. So it reduced the risk of the existing facility massively, had a lot less failures, and it enabled our business to build new services for our customers at pace, which was the real thing we were after.
Yeah, excellent. And what's been the overall sort of business productivity impact of that transformation?
So I think the main thing for us is the speed with which we can get to market. So our first project was, it was quite a simple project. It was our tax advisory services as a service. And that project took us 9 months to build it out, get it through governance, risk, IT security, everything like that. And our record today is 10 days. So we've managed to make a 27x improvement on our ability to build services for our clients. Incredible. So I think it's amazing, yeah.
That's really cool. And how's AWS enabled that change and that change in customer experience?
Well, I'd say that the main way is the type of offerings that we are now able to offer. So we can now take entire solutions to market and give our customers an outcome on those solutions. So as a consulting practice, previously we would often advise our clients on how to solve problems. What we can do now is we can actually build that solution for them as well, to take them all the way through that life cycle and give them that value at the end. And that's really opened us up a lot of new opportunities, opportunities that KPMG certainly wouldn't have had in our marketplace before. And that's had an impact through pre-sales, post-sales as well, so we can demo solutions to clients as part of trying to get them to understand how we're going to help, and that's opened new lines of businesses that we really wouldn't have had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about, so I mentioned earlier on about this sort of boon in machine learning, artificial intelligence, et cetera. So are you finding that customers are adopting those sort of technologies, and how are you helping them?
So it's really interesting, actually, because what our clients are saying to us is they've got a business imperative they're trying to solve. They're trying to either move faster, or they're trying to solve problems in a different way, whatever it is. And one of the main things they're trying to do there is enable their data science community to get working on their data.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we would propose some solutions that AWS have already built for them, solutions like Recognition and SageMaker.
Interesting.
And that's really allowed those businesses to move much, much faster.
Yeah.
So it's not about necessarily, they're not asking us for those services, but the fact that they're already there and able to be leveraged very, very quickly, that's what's bringing them the value.
Excellent. So I also made the assertion earlier on that that culture plays a big part in innovation. So how are you addressing the sort of culture of innovation at KPMG?
So, well, in an organisation like ours, and I expect a lot of the organisations here today, this is by far the biggest challenge. You know, I always say people are way more complex than machines, and getting them to make this transition is definitely the thing that's been the big struggle for us. However, we started small, the same way as we did with our first project. So we started small, we built on it, and now we've got a culture of working at pace. We're following agile methodologies and really focusing on our clients. So taking that idea of listening to our customers, understanding what they want, and working backwards from that.
Yeah.
And that has really transformed our business.
That's awesome. And if you could give sort of one piece of advice to the people in the audience here about how to get started, what would you say?
So start with a simple single project, right? So take that first project and start delivering value to the business really, really quickly, as fast as you can, really. And make that, as much of what you'd build for that project, reusable on subsequent projects. That's going to be really helpful for you. And that'll allow you to grow, as we've done, to having hundreds of workloads in public cloud. Yeah. So just don't go for cloud nirvana from the beginning, because it doesn't exist. Try and build something and add value really quickly.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Chris, thank you very much for spending some time with us. I appreciate the partnership as always.
Thank you
very much. Chris Astley, thank you. So we've been seeing over the course of the last number of years, back to that sort of theme of exponential growth in the demand for the types of skills that your businesses need in order to kind of really realize the benefits of cloud and this new operating model. As I stand here today, there are 15,831 permanent jobs in the UK and Ireland that specify AWS as being a core competency. That's almost 10% of the total jobs market. And there's a further 8,500 contractors that also specify this requirement. We just simply aren't producing enough technical talent to satisfy the need that we all have here to be successful. And so last year, we announced a program with the Prince's Trust and with the Ministry of Defense called AWS Restart. And the idea of that is to capture people that otherwise wouldn't make it into technology, to give them the training that they need in order to make a difference and contribute to the world of technology. And I'm pleased to say that the AWS Restart program is going great guns, and we're really delighted at the response from companies like KPMG and Direct Line, who are here in the audience, and a number of other companies who are participating and partnering with us on AWS Restart. I'd really wish for you to go and speak to the folks in the training booth to find out more about how you can participate in AWS Restart, because it really is making a difference. It's not going to be the nirvana to solve all of those open jobs that are out there, but it is going to make a difference, and I'd encourage you to get involved. The other thing that we're doing this year with the Prince's Trust is we're participating in the Million Makers program, which is essentially the technology industry trying to raise £1 million for the Prince's Trust to, again, help more people get back into technology from the get-go. So we have a Prince's Trust and AWS booth outside as well, so I'd encourage you to go speak to the folks out there and see how you can get involved in sort of competing for things like reInvent tickets, or we have Grand Tour filming. If you're familiar with the Grand Tour, we have tickets to the Grand Tour filming as well, which is sort of money can't buy types of prizes. So go visit the booth out there and get yourselves involved in that. So before I hand over, I just want to go back and revisit this quote from Jeff Bezos, that there are day one companies and there are day two companies, and we all know how day two ends. And that's why we always say at Amazon it's always day one. But the point I really want to emphasize here is that for all companies, it ought to be a mindset of day one. Customers are always dissatisfied, and we should always index on what they want next. And so being day one is about optimizing for that and that only. And to help sort of progress the story further, I'd like now to introduce our next speaker, our keynote speaker, the Director for Enterprise Strategy at AWS, Miriam McLemore.
Good morning. Oh, come on. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am thrilled to have the opportunity to be here with you today. I am now an enterprise strategist for AWS, but I spent the bulk of my career at the Coca-Cola company. I was the corporate CIO. I spent 26 years at Coca-Cola, so quite the journey. I started my career there in finance. Spent about 4 years in the global marketing team, a couple of years in our North America business, and then the final dozen as part of IT. And when I retired from Coca-Cola at the end of 2016, I had responsibility for a broad range of technologies. I had all things customer and consumer facing, so all 600 brand websites, everything mobile, all of our large experiences like the Olympics, World Cup, Euro Cup, the Super Bowl, those kind of large customer, consumer experiences. And then I had tech all the way back to our labs. So I had laboratory information management systems, HR systems, legal, public affairs, sustainability, just a broad range of technologies that at Coca-Cola, being over 130 years old, was a lot of legacy, right? And lots of challenges to move at speed. Coca-Cola is largely a youth brand and focused on youth and really bringing the next generation into the franchise. And so that focus of Coca-Cola meant that you had to be current. You had to feel like an innovative company. And so that challenge in an IT environment where you had such a heavy legacy to deal with was something I faced every day in all functions across the company. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and a little bit about just the journey. Most enterprises, I now get to go run around the world and speak to large enterprises about the challenges we face as enterprise leaders to become what Gavin was just describing, which is a day one company. So, change is hard. We have high customer and consumer expectations, certainly at Coca-Cola. You had to be current. You had to be relevant in the market. And so we often, as part of the marketing organization, talk about right message, right time, right consumer, right? And real time. How do you do that? How does IT enable that messaging? Very low barriers to entry in the beverage industry. All sorts of beverages. You look at the craft beer industry today. Beverages popping up everywhere that didn't have the same restrictions that a Coca-Cola company does from a beverage quality, distribution, all of the things that come with a brand like Coca-Cola. So you could pop up small beverages, try them out, and that was a challenge to us. Certainly also just a rapidly changing environment from a tech standpoint, from an equipment standpoint, from an ingredient standpoint, just constant change. Food law changes all over the world. I had responsibility for everything R&D for the company, so having our brands be consistent with food laws all over the world was part of the system, so I had all of our product lifecycle management systems as well. So that was the world that we were in and you were in as large enterprises. And what I experienced, put together a little list of the things we were challenged with and the things we wanted to become. Right? We were challenged with slow delivery cycles within IT. I'm trying to deliver promotions in market, and I needed fast time to market. Eurocup's going to happen on the day it happens. I could not be delayed by a PMO process in IT that was going to say, oh, well, that project you're going to have to wait. We're going to deliver it in a month. Well, no, that's not going to work out well in market. So getting where we could deliver at speed, and Gavin talked about speed matters. Effort spent in the wrong areas. We always had too many people working on legacy problems, P1s, P0s, where we wanted to be moving, thinking about the new decisions, working toward the future versus just running the environment that we had created. And I was a big part of creating that environment, so no blame cast on anyone, right? I was there quite a long time. Silos and gatekeepers. That, for me, was one of the biggest struggles. We had to go through the procurement process, the legal process, the finance process, the business planning process, right? And process really became the enemy to progress. And it was interesting, throughout my career, we spent time, and I actually started my career at Arthur Andersen and Company, so Accenture today. And we would say companies need to be more process-driven. It's interesting, I come to Amazon, and Jeff Bezos says, process is often the enemy of business outcome, because the process can become the thing. And I very much experienced that throughout my career, where, oh, we checked the box, we ran the process, we did the PMO process, we did the procurement process, but did we focus on the business outcome that we were trying to achieve and enabling collaboration across the system? Coca-Cola, of course, operates in 209 countries across 32 major markets. So getting collaboration, being able to reuse and move technology, capabilities, promotions, market to market, was essential to the company to reduce cost and to operate at speed. Fear of change. Certainly within my team, I had a globally distributed team, had a dev center in the Philippines, one in Istanbul, one in Brussels, one in Mexico, and of course a large team in Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Coca-Cola. And there was a lot of fear, cultural resistance of the changes and the future, and what are you doing to me? I was there 26 years. There are many people at Coca-Cola longer than I. I just went to a retirement party for someone 35 years at the company. When you have that longevity at a company, it is very difficult to get people to change. And we needed to be focused on what our customers wanted, what our consumers are expecting. Certainly, and I talked about processes, we had change-resistant processes. Those kind of ruled. And trying to unwind those processes, I had responsibility for HR, and HR was one of the challenging functions. We had an on-prem SAP HR system with 92 other legacy HR applications, and I was responsible for picking all of that up and moving to Workday. So HR data in the cloud. That was a big move for the company. And a big just cultural change. And then, like the HR environment, huge amount of legacy and the need for innovation. So that was kind of what we were and where we wanted to get. And I want to take you through some of the things that, it feels like bad news for an enterprise, but I don't think it's bad news. I loved working for the Coca-Cola Company. I had some fabulous experiences all over the world. And you need to recognize as enterprises the things that you have. What are the value elements to your organization? Obviously, deep knowledge of your market. Coca-Cola understood markets at a street level. Highly skilled and committed employees. Financial resources. We talk about startups having, right, the startups are the ones that are in the great position. Enterprises have the financial resources and the customer base and the brand equity that startups dream of. When startups could get audience with anybody at Coca-Cola, they were just thrilled. And so remembering what your advantages are. We often talked about at Coke, how do we digitize the vast physical assets that the company has? How do we make them part of our future and our solution? Coke has on the road more trucks and vehicles than FedEx and UPS combined. 14 million pieces of equipment out in the market that people touch on a regular basis. How do you leverage that from a digital standpoint in the world today? And so there are the processes that are in your way, but there are also things like Coke's supply chain. That was a huge benefit. The ability to get a product spread all over the world in a month is an absolute advantage. And so being clear on your advantages, and something else I liked about what Gavin said, I think enterprises forgot often that they have innovation in their DNA. Coke was a startup, right? It was a cough syrup. The pharmacy is in Atlanta, where it moved from being a medicinal product to a beverage. Coke was a startup. Getting the distribution for Coke was a handshake deal, $1 spend, partnership with McDonald's, handshake deal. These were startup mindsets that, to me, it's more about regaining that DNA, regaining a focus on the things that make you different, the things that are the value statements of your organization, and then pairing that with the technology and the capabilities that exist in market today. And I get, change is hard, right? The established processes we talked about, cultural resistance is huge, existing infrastructure is a challenge, and I had the opportunity to live through all of those challenges. So I put together a short list of things that I think that get you started, at least got us started at Coca-Cola, so hopefully you find it helpful. Because the goal is to unblock innovation and take advantage of your strengths. Right, that's all what we were trying to do, at least at the Coca-Cola Company and across the system. But it is, to me, at the end of the day, an organizational challenge with an embedded technology challenge, but the tech really works. It's about getting the organization to leverage it in the right way to build value for your organization. So here's my little starter list, hopefully helpful to you. So in order to transform, I think the first thing you've got to do is gain technical flexibility and speed. You've got to organize as smaller independent teams. My Workday team started out with 150 people. It's very hard to get anything done when it's 150 people. So we broke it down into the functions. So we had a learning management team, and we had a core data team, and we had a comp and bin team. So once we broke it down into its core components, we began to pick up momentum. Agile and lean practices, we all know that. But training your team, gaining experience in agile and lean, and training your business teams on what does that mean. My consumer team, doing sprints with our business partners to prepare an experience for the Olympics was a training process to get the business team on board, because you can't do it without your business partners. So agile and lean, investing in strategic capabilities. AWS was a big partner for me as well from a marketing standpoint. We leveraged Adobe pretty broadly. Moving to the cloud, and I'll talk about Coke's journey here in a little bit to the cloud and what we moved first and how we moved. And then getting a data strategy in place. My role when I was part of the marketing organization was to lead business intelligence for the company globally. And we all know today that data is the currency, and you've got to get a clear data strategy in place. So second thing, so technical flexibility and speed, an environment of innovation. And this is where, to me, the culture really comes to the front. First thing you have to do, and we needed to do at Coca-Cola, is lower the cost of failure. No one's going to invent on your behalf. No one's going to take you to the future if, when they screw up or something doesn't work, you burn them at the stake. And if they're made an example of what not to do, you're just not going to get the reach anymore. They're going to back into the corners and say, okay, this is a risk-averse organization. You've got to lower the risk of failure, whatever that means in your organization. And for us, it meant doing small things. Chris made a great point about start with something small. Scott and I have 3 children. You know, with your children, you trust them with small things, and then over time, you trust them with bigger things. It actually works very similarly in an organization. Trust people with small decisions, gain some comfort and momentum, and then you can move up to larger decisions. Getting the impediments to innovation out of the way, lowering the gatekeeping is also a huge part of creating an innovative culture, a culture that actually breeds innovation. Jeff Bezos says famously in our shareholder letters that he believes Amazon is one of the best companies in which to fail. What a great thing for a CEO to say. Can you, as the IT leader, or can you get a business partner to say the same thing to your organization? Because we all know from high school or primary school science, to actually invent an experiment, there has to be failure. And we've got to learn that within organizations, if we want to try, learn, and grow. Then the third thing, security. I know some people might think, oh, Coca-Cola, you know, you're not a financial institution, you don't worry about security. For Coca-Cola, brand image, corporate image is huge. Our CEO said to me, please do not destroy in 130 seconds what it took us 130 years to build because of a consumer data breach or some, you know, issue in market or defacing of websites, which, you know, being a large brand we were constantly hacked and attacked. So making security everyone's responsibility versus making it a team over here that everybody passes through was the biggest thing we had to learn. So we launched a security training program for everyone, ensuring transparency and auditability for the senior leadership so they knew. When I moved to the new product lifecycle management system for the company, which meant we touched the formulas, I sat down the CFO, the head of audit, the head of technical, of course, so the guy that owns the ingredients and the equipment, and we all sat in a room and said, this is what we're doing, here are the risks, this is the journey we are embarking on. So, but making that transparent to leadership so they know where you're headed. So those are my 3 things that begin your transformation journey. Build agility to respond to opportunities by creating some technical flexibility. Remove your barriers to innovation in a secure environment. No one's going to let you do any of that if you can't convince them that it's a secure environment. And that sets the stage for transformation. So we have 3 customers here today that we want to hear from. And so I want to first invite up Chris Reagan and Kareem Al-Nakesh, hopefully I got that close to right, to the stage. Chris, Kareem.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first introduce my colleague Kareem, who is the program lead on PowerShift. Kareem has a history of working in EDF in business transformation and change, and has worked exclusively on PowerShift with me for the last 1.5 years.
And Chris Regan. So Chris Regan heads up business development within EDF Energy, which is actually in our innovation lab within EDF Energy. Got a background in running our trading desk for many years and recently stepped into innovation.
So today we're going to take you through the disruption that's coming into the energy industry and what we've done at EDF to face that in the decentralization of energy, and then we'll show our journey with AWS and our PowerShift platform.
Okay, so just a little bit about the company first. So we're actually the UK's largest producer of low-carbon electricity, something we're proud of. We've got a large presence in both the business-to-business and business-to-consumer energy supply business. And we're also adding to our nuclear fleet. So many of you will be aware of the project we've got going on at Hinkley Point C. So it's one of the largest construction projects in Europe at the moment. So yeah, so that's an overview of the company.
Thank you. So to start, I'd like to roll back in time to the 27th of March 2001, which was a very poignant day in the energy industry because it was the launch of the way the electricity market still functions today. It was called the New Electricity Trading Arrangements, and it was very much based around the way that our grid was set up back then. So we had big power stations. EDF has a number of nuclear power stations that we operate, but there was also coal power stations and combined cycle gas turbines, so CCGTs. And the job of our operator, our transmission system operator, National Grid, was essentially to balance supply and demand. And they did this through moving those big power stations around. So it was mainly to start with the big coal power stations. They're circa 500 megawatts in size. And they would say, okay, I need a little bit more, I need a little bit less. And they would move those power stations around. And people like myself who were in the utilities, who were operating those power stations, would essentially balance our position with the amazing spreadsheet. So if you fast forward to where we are now in 2018, the coal units are starting to switch off. I don't know if any of you follow the news. We've had this summer and the last summer in the news that there's been days, like 4 days in a row, where no coal power stations have been on. If that was happening back in 2001, there would be very big difficulties in how you balance the system. But also, our kind of low carbon ambitions have really started to come into the country. So of a kind of 60 gigawatt size of market, up to 20 gigawatts of that could be wind. Up to 12 of that could be solar. So what's starting to happen is those levers that National Grid used to have to move people around are disappearing. And so they're looking at lots of customer side and what could you do on the customer side to help balance the system. So I'd like to introduce our PowerShift system that we've recently developed on AWS. On the screens behind me, you'll see some examples of some batteries we've got under control on the customer's screen. But it allows customers to become mini power stations. So instead of us moving around a big 500 megawatt coal power station like we used to, we find 500 customers with 1 megawatt flexibility, which could be in their fridges. It could be they've got batteries on site, or they've got small engines. And what instead we do is we use our PowerShift services to move 500 customers like a power station. We offer that up to National Grid to balance the system, or we look at the energy prices. And when the price is really high, then what we do is we switch those customers down, and those customers make money from that.
Okay, so in order to achieve that business kind of vision that Chris has set out there, we essentially needed 5 layers of technology. So we needed a customer interface for customers to interact with, let us know what their assets are available to do and when, what the capacity of their assets are, things like that, but fundamentally engage with the service, log onto a web app, see how much money they'd made from the different services we put them into, etc. We needed to store that data somewhere that could be held and processed. We needed trading tools to take data and to calculate which assets to turn on and when and for what price. We needed an Internet Things capability to take essentially a trading decision and then communicate that to assets and control them. And we needed a billing and a settlement capability that was sophisticated enough that it could operate across the different commercial products that we offer customers and different types of customers. So what we knew going into this market is that the product we'd take to market initially wouldn't be the product that we'd end up with. Like the speeches have touched on already today, we knew that we'd need to be able to adapt to what our customer needs were. Regulation is still forming in the market. Customers are still deciding what it is that they need in the market. So we knew we'd be judged, and our success would depend on how flexible we were. So up on the screen there is a snippet of our DevOps pipeline, and that was key for us. In order to be able to deliver in bite-sized chunks quite quickly and learn quickly from that, developing a DevOps pipeline was key. It allowed for the automated regression testing and unit testing, essentially allowing a code change by a developer to be deployed through accounts in an automated and controlled way, allowing us to identify issues really quickly, which is key. Now, when operating on-premise, we've often found there's not the capacity to deploy changes in that frequency or in that volume. So that was key for us. So that's delivering in bite-sized chunks. Scalability was key. So you can imagine optimizing assets all across the country is going to require a highly scalable and reactive solution. So we've leveraged, managed services such as Aurora databases and serverless platforms like Lambda to provide that scalable compute resource, elastic compute resource that builds our solution fit for purpose for the future. So that was really important for us. And lastly, flexibility. So as I alluded to earlier, we know that we'll need to continually change. And one of the benefits of AWS is the depth and the breadth of tools that are offered that are kind of agnostic to programming languages or technologies or vendors. So we actually built our solution around that flexibility. So we built an extraction layer essentially, which talks to our settlement tools and our trading tools and our customer portal. And what we can do is change the services within that extraction layer whenever we want, without the recipients of that data knowing. And what that does is sets us up for the future to leverage the tools that exist now and the tools that will come in the future easily. So they're three key things for us. In terms of what is next, so we want to, next year we want to start to look at, as well as optimize our assets on an individual basis, what about a portfolio? How do we understand how we can optimize better, more intelligently across a portfolio of assets rather than individually? So we're going to hopefully leverage some of the tools within AI to do that and more.
And for myself on the business side, some of the really exciting things that we've got going on, if you looked in the news from EDF a couple of weeks ago, we've signed a contract with Nissan to look at a second life battery. I think this is such a great example of the circular economy, where we're taking spent batteries from older Nissan Leafs and we're putting them together to create a 1 megawatt battery, which Nissan are doing at their Sunderland site. We'll then use PowerShift to optimize that battery, and it brings down the cost of the energy on the site where they're making those cars again. So a great example. And now we're starting to look at how we could look at the electric vehicles that go through the UK and how they charge, and whether we could use vehicle-to-grid services. So that's our next move forward. Now, as EDF, we obviously have a large footprint across Europe. So myself and Kareem are starting to look at the other offerings that we've got in group, which are for different markets. And through 2019, our plan will be to start integrating all of our different offerings to those different markets into more of a single customer-facing entity for PowerShift and flexibility. And finally, I just wanted to land on, if you looked in the news last week, I think it was the Amazon fulfillment centers that actually said we're really looking into getting solar onto our sites. But they knew that that's solar with a battery to make that extra income. And so as the supplier to that site, we're really looking forward to see how that moves forward and be part of that journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, Kareem, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. What an amazing innovation story. And especially at a company that I'm sure it took some organizational and cultural change to get that type of innovation accepted and developed and to stick with it. That's, you know, one of the other things I find with innovation and that Amazon does very well is think in the long term. Many innovations that are conceptualized, it takes a while for them to evolve and for them to really provide the value that was initially anticipated. And we would talk at Coke sometimes about having the shiny object syndrome. We'd get distracted by the latest shiny object. So being able to stick with an innovation is a big part of the journey. So I want to share a little bit with you about the cloud transformation story at Coca-Cola. As I mentioned to you, I had responsibility for the technology behind a lot of our big events, the Super Bowl being one of those. And I don't know if you recall, but in 2013, the Super Bowl was being played in the Superdome. And there was a power outage in the Superdome in the third quarter of the game. Well, we had what we thought was a pretty cool promotion running. It was a mobile app where you could choose, it was a race, and you could choose a different ending to the race. And marketing had come to us, and we had built that together, and we had taken what marketing projected as the consumer uptake on that event, and we had 10x'd their top projection, thinking, okay, we're good. We've got the capacity to handle even some viral uptake on this. This is back in 2013. But nobody anticipated a power outage. Well, what happened? When the lights went out, people had time to play. People at home weren't watching a game anymore. People in the event weren't watching a game anymore. And famously, at least from a marketing standpoint, Oreo puts out, hey, you can still dunk in the dark. Well, to our marketers, that's right message, right time, right consumer. That's who we want to be. Meanwhile, you couldn't log on to our experience, or you're getting dropped off our experience. It was a bad day. The Super Bowl happens to happen on a Sunday, which means I had to go into work on Monday as the technology leader for marketing with an event that didn't scale. The Super Bowl is kind of a big deal. We spend a lot of money at the Coca-Cola company. And so I went into the marketing leadership team and said, we're done. I'm done guessing. You're done guessing. We're moving to cloud. And so we knew we needed to transform to have the agility and the speed that our markets needed, and from a brand and corporate image, the reliability. So that was our journey. The marketing team got behind the move, which was huge, having an executive sponsor and a team. And our chief marketing officer was willing to stand on stage and said, we have to be agile. We have to be current. So that was what we were doing with the business. But in IT, to get IT to move was a whole nother part of the journey. And so within IT, we basically started a parallel path. We're moving the marketing sites. And so we started with our digital properties. And within IT, we started looking at our application portfolio. We had 1,500 applications running the Coca-Cola company. We do not need that number of applications to run a company of the scope of Coca-Cola. So we were trying to cut to about half that, and did a full application portfolio rationalization, looked at our staff and said, do we have the right people? If we are going to start a transformation journey, do we have the right skills? What are the training needs? What are the skill gaps? Let's hire for skill gaps and let's begin a training program. And I tell you, if there's one thing I could do over again, we would have trained more people sooner. We trained our key architects, which was great because those are the people listen to. So we took and certified our key architects on AWS, but we didn't train enough people fast enough. So that slowed us down. Once we got training really rolling, then we started to make better progress. And we picked some key technology partners. So what did we do? Started with our digital properties, picked up all 600 brand websites and moved them to AWS Cloud. Leveraged the security posture of AWS, which was huge for us, and got the mindset shifted that in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Coca-Cola company, we were never going to hire better security technologists than Amazon. That Coca-Cola in Atlanta is not where you want to work if you're a high-end cyber engineer. So getting that mindset shifted in our business was a big part of the journey. We created what we called freedom within a framework. So we went to a microservices architecture that enabled our markets to focus on the experience they were trying to build, the cultural relevance of that experience, but not rebuild some of the core services like login and registration. I didn't need that rebuilt by agencies all over the world and creating consumer data breach concerns. So we went to a microservices architecture, and one of the biggest things that cloud did for us is provide cost transparency to our markets. I had previously taken the cost of infrastructure, done some math based on sales data, and allocated the cost of infrastructure to the market's P&Ls. Nobody was happy, and IT was the bad guy. But there was no other way to do it. You couldn't see who was using what when. Moving to cloud, the markets could meter their own decisions, could see what they were spending on a promotion. They could make the call, got IT out of the middle, out of being the bad guy, out of just allocating costs that they couldn't control to their P&Ls. But there are a bunch of obstacles, right? The markets at Coca-Cola have very close relationships with local agencies, and we're outsourcing tech to what are not scalable providers in the world of Coca-Cola. And so, but there was a lack of trust of corporate and global IT to deliver, because we'd always get distracted by whatever corporate priority, and the markets left without a solution. So that was a bad situation to be in. So what we did is, first, we created an agency onboarding process. So we met with the agencies regionally and explained how we work. Created a partnership with those agencies, a respect for those agencies that we had not gone through before, and the marketers really appreciated that effort. Second, we picked a set of technology integrators, not just 5 global ones, regional technology integrators that our markets were familiar with, but then we certified those technology integrators so that we could have some governance over the tech that was going into market. And we walked them through and trained them on our architecture, our approach to services that they could affect, the ones they needed to call, and that was a huge win for us. The microservices architecture approach for both web and mobile was big, and this is in 2014, right? So fairly early for a move to cloud and this type of evolution. We also built out a common content management platform on Adobe. We were all over the place before, and Coke spends about $1 billion on content creation annually. And so the ability to move that content from market to market effectively had a huge ROI, which helped us from a business case standpoint for all of the project and everything we were trying to do. So we started with marketing, started with our digital properties, and what that gave us from a journey standpoint is digital became the poster child for agility. We had an executive sponsor in our chief marketing officer, and at Coca-Cola, chief marketing officer is a very critical position, so he would stand on stage and speak about the partnership with the global IT team. We had a very strong partnership with AWS. And again, this was somewhat early on for cloud migration, and not all the methodology that exists today was in place. So we were co-developing. And it was a great partnership for us, probably part of the reason I joined AWS. But also, after we moved the digital properties, obviously I came from a background in data and data analytics. We started moving data analytics to the cloud. One of the other technologies I had responsibility for, if you've experienced, is the freestyle machines, where you can mix your own drink. They had a couple in the UK now still. And so that machine was company owned. Typically, vending machines are owned by bottlers, and they are dumb machines. You don't get data out of them. The freestyle machines phoned home every night. And so we got consumption data, day part data, what products selling when, operational statistics on the machines. And so that was our first move to cloud for analytics, was the freestyle machines. And it was a great demonstration of data analytics and the power of data and being able to segment by day part, by consumer, by market, by location that the machines were in. So for us, again, getting a case that you can share and market, 'cause I think it's one of the things IT doesn't do as well as we should, is market. Market what you built, market what you developed. I love the customer example we just saw because it sounds like they've marketed very, very well. So we learned how to leverage data analytics and then spread that to other capabilities across Coca-Cola. We ultimately closed and sold our North America data center. And as of first quarter this year, Coke will be out of the data center business. So moved all other data centers. So a great accomplishment for a 130-year-old legacy organization. And it began for us with a burning platform. Leverage that burning platform. If you don't have one, I suggest maybe you invent one, find one. But having a burning platform certainly helped us. But we also very much stayed focused on security because we knew if we forgot to talk about security, people would lose faith. And so that was a part of all of our conversations. I think sometimes people try to avoid it and go around that conversation. And I think it's much more productive if you just face up to it and talk about your security posture, what makes sense. And for us, and part of that agency onboarding and technology integrator selection was getting consistent technology, not the same, consistent technology across the 30 major markets particularly, and allowed us to operate at speed across all 209 countries as we're moving promotions and capabilities around the world. So that's a little bit about my journey. My one thing, if you have to ask what was the thing that made it work, it was continuous small wins. As Chris said, start with something small, something important, but something doable, and gain momentum. That, for me, was the thing that overcame the opposition, overcame the distrust, overcame the lack of knowledge, the cultural resistance, the processes, just sticking with it. And it was hard. Many days it was hard. Getting a business sponsor as well, a couple of them. I had our chief technical officer, in addition to our chief marketing officer, and chief technical at Coke is products, ingredients, the laboratories, right? Everything, R&D, product quality, all the technical for Coke. And those two executives being the key sponsors was critical. So that's a little bit about my story at Coca-Cola. And now I have another customer to introduce to you. Phil Wood is going to talk to you about his experience.
Morning. That's a lot of orange. OK, so let's make a start. So EasyJet. We are the UK's most considered brand when it comes to flying across Europe. We've over 300 aircraft transporting 90 million passengers, and we have a 75% customer loyalty. And we aren't a low-cost airline. We are a great value airline. People expect great value from us, and we give that to them. And we do that because we understand our customers. We know that the 170 million items of food means a lot to them. We also know where they want to go with the 1.3 billion searches that they do on our website every year. And we also need to understand our fleet. So we have over 1.5 billion hours worth of flight data. And safety is a massive part of our DNA. And we have millions of hours of recorded flight data, which we can recreate those customer experiences to make sure it's the safest experience next time. It's also massively important for us to understand how much products we sell. And therefore, this is a brand that innovates. This is a brand that cut out the middleman and sold direct to the flights direct to the customer. This is the brand that gave you an award-winning app that not only allows you to check in and check the status of your flight, but by taking a photograph of a destination, it'll actually let you book that. So in our 23 years of flying, we've always pushed the boundaries of innovation and, of course, technology. Technology that works. There we go. Technology. So this is a PC and a modem that ran our very first revenue management system. This was back in the day that prices were created as a static file, and it was sent to travel agents on a daily basis. So if you remember back then when you were booking your flight from CFAX, or you'd go to the travel agent and they'd say to you, if you come back tomorrow, we reckon we'll have a better deal on tomorrow. So our CEO at the time said that just wasn't acceptable. And in true startup fashion, he did something about it. He created an RMS system on this very PC. And what we went to was a dynamic pricing file, which meant we could update our prices in seconds. And this was well ahead of the competition at the time, especially in a low-cost airline such as ourselves. So this could be any PC. I could have just taken this photograph off the internet, but it's not. This PC is actually at the front of our reception, if you come to our hangar in Luton, and it's there with pride. And the reason it's there is because we're proud of our heritage. We're proud of the way we innovated. Now, clearly, we've moved away from having one of these PCs, which was actually kept underneath the CEO's desk for 11 years. And that desk was at the bottom of the runway in a porter cabin. So we're not here to talk about business continuity. But we moved away from that to lots of PCs under lots of desks, or I think it's called a data center. But we didn't want to lose that flexibility, that drive that we had as a startup. And we knew that our customer base, as our customer base was growing, we wanted to embrace scalability. So moving to the cloud was an obvious option for us. Now, clearly, traveling in the cloud is it comes naturally to us. We're an airline. And we were amongst the first to go, to take on the cloud revolution. And we experimented. We had our flight prices in the cloud. We have a system that manages all of our maintenance. We have another system called Apex, which actually gives cosmic radiation data to NASA. I'm not 100% sure why, but we do. And we didn't just use AWS, I'm sorry to say. We experimented. We tried lots of different providers. But what we found was that where we gained scalability, we often lost, but without control, it meant it became expensive. And when we gained pace without structure, it often meant we'd lose flexibility. We were still building stuff the way we'd build it on-prem. We didn't actually go through that change. So when we actually revised our cloud strategy, we were looking for a partner who really embodied our orange spirit. And that's why we went all in with AWS. So one of the first things that we did was we looked at our data analytic capability, and we moved our data analytics capability into the cloud. Our goal is to be the most data-driven airline. And we did this, and we had a huge success. And over 8 years of us doing this, we were able to optimize our destinations and flight times. We were able to predict the failure of a component. So again, making our passengers' journey that much safer. And again, we can predict the types of foods, like 170 million items of food, we can predict the type of food you're going to eat on that journey. And this was a great opportunity for us, and we created 28 data scientist roles as part of that, and we continue to grow that capability. And to further support that, we also, and we're now doing it, building a cloud center of excellence. So it's great hearing the story around Coca-Cola there. So we're building that cloud center of excellence to make sure we're running our cloud operations in the most efficient way. And we've got additional cloud specialists joining the team, training up the rest of the team to really leverage the benefits of AWS. And over the next 5 years, our plan is to migrate and re-architect into the cloud. And I'd love to be stood up here in 5 years' time and say we're completely data center free. So we're doing that. And we're not just doing it from an infrastructure perspective, we're doing it from a cost perspective, because we can pay for what we use rather than what we install. And AWS, using native tools, will help us do that, but a lot more transparent. It will allow us to expand aggressively and to manage spikes in our businesses. You know, we have a huge amount of spikes when we have sales. We have almost 900,000 flights booked during a day, and that's about 3,500 a minute, which actually it means that in our peak times, we are filling 20 aircraft a minute, and that's insane. And so we can't have systems where we have to manually hand crank it up. We have to be flexible. And we want to expand aggressively, and we did that earlier this year with Air Berlin. And by being in the cloud, it allows us to do that a lot easily. So our goal is to have effortless infrastructure. But it's not just infrastructure. Partnering with AWS means that we can get access to a wide range of services, which really stimulate our creative juices, because we love innovation at EasyJet. So we have started to utilize Lex to allow our customers to ask about the status of their flight. We're investigating use of AWS artificial intelligence to really do some deep data analytics. And we're trialing some inspections of our planes by automated drones. And even beyond, looking at wearables and our crew's uniform to understand, kind of their fatigue and the journeys they go on. And looking at a system we've got, which we created inside our in our own building, Avoid, which is an ash detection system. We all remember when we had that problem a few years back. So we don't always know what the future is going to do, and we don't always know what solutions we're going to need. But what we do know is that that's going to be in the cloud. And what we do know is that we're going to do that with AWS. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Phil, thank you. Another great example, and I think there's an orange theme between us, so that's good too. And I was stuck in that ash cloud. I was at Heathrow when they actually closed the Irish airspace first. I was headed to Dublin and got on the plane as fast as I could, the closest one, and flew to Detroit because it got me back in the US because I was a little afraid about being stuck. So I want to talk to you a little bit now, after being at Coke for 26 years, what I find different about Amazon and the culture at Amazon. It's been an interesting journey to learn about and think about some of the things that Amazon does naturally that we could have used and leveraged at Coca-Cola if I had been a little bit more aware. So the two things that I would call out first are focus and speed. The speed at which Amazon works, it is a weekly cadence at Amazon. We do weekly business reviews. At Coke, and in my experience with many customers, the cadence of your business is set by the business planning cycle, the quarterly board meetings or quarterly results, when you can get on somebody's calendar, which in our case sometimes was a couple of months out, so that you could get a decision. These routine meetings that would happen. And at Amazon, we don't have the patience for that speed. We operate on a weekly cadence, which is maybe not for every enterprise. Coke would have a very hard time with that cadence, but it's something to think about, is how do you increase the speed in your organization? And when you're taking off on a digital transformation journey, you need to do it at speed. To say I'm going to transform my organization and then we're going to do it over 5 years, I do feel at some point you've missed the point. Right? This is supposed to be agile, supposed to be innovative. You've got to do the project with a sense of speed. And it's not actually a project. I feel like I misspoke there. It's a new way of working. And that's the other thing about Amazon is focus. At Amazon, the focus is on the customer. And the belief is if we focus on delivering value to our customers, everything else will come. And so putting the customer first, inventing, and then, and I mentioned earlier, being patient, allowing those inventions to have enough time to to actually create the value that you anticipated. Don't cut them short. Don't suboptimize. Go through the journey, are the things that I find very inspiring at Amazon. And we have these 14 leadership principles, and I wanted to call out 3 of them for you today that I find different and would have impacted my journey at Coca-Cola. The first one is customer obsession. We'll talk a little bit about that. The next is bias for action, that speed component. And then the third one is the have backbone, disagree, but then commit. And so we'll talk about those 3. So first, customer obsession. At Amazon, everything that we do starts with a customer value statement and works backwards from that. And you may have heard about the process that we have for writing a press release. I think that could have been very valuable to Coca-Cola in my interaction with the different business leaders that I had. If we wrote what we were talking about delivering, not in a business requirements document, but in press release form. How is this going to be received in market? That's what we do at Amazon. You write the press release as if it were about to get launched in market. So, on October 30th, Amazon launches XXXX, right? And fill it in, or Coca-Cola delivers and fill in whatever it is from a press release standpoint, how that would have been received in the news. And then you go through a process and write and then answer all the frequently asked questions that your key stakeholders would have, that the consumers or customers would have. And so that exercise would have been at Coke something that our business partners would actually read, could actually edit, and we could come to better agreement, I think, on what we were jointly trying to achieve. At Amazon, it acts as the destination and the vision for what you're developing. After you do the frequently asked questions, then you actually write the user interaction manual. And so then you can kind of see how it would work. And it is a very interesting process. We run workshops on how to do this process. So if you're interested, please talk to any of us after, and we can share more detail on that process. But it is, I think, a very unique approach that Amazon takes. And I spent so many years dealing with business requirements documents that were arduous and 500 lines, and nobody would have read them, even us. And they didn't stay current. But a press release is pretty easy to keep current. And new frequently asked questions, pretty easy to add. And they make sense to your business leaders. The next area is bias for action. And a lot of this goes back to what we were talking about, is creating a culture of innovation in your organization. Moving decision-making down into the organization is a huge part of that. And at Amazon, we talk about 2 different types of decisions. We talk about one-way doors and two-way door decisions. And I really like this approach because we had a bad habit at Coke of things needing senior level decision making when it really wasn't relevant. And so being able to separate decisions and move them down in the organization is a very empowering for your organization, for your team, but it also creates speed. And so a one-way door is a decision that if you make this decision, it's going to be very difficult to walk back through. So, in the US, there's lots of conversations about Amazon's next headquarters, HQ2. That decision, once made and the city once picked, is going to be really hard to back out of. So that's a one-way door decision. We need to have senior leadership involvement in that decision. We had many one-way door decisions, like closing data centers at Coca-Cola, that needed senior level involvement. But there's so many more two-way door decisions, which are decisions that you can make, but you could reverse. So I walked through that door and went, not in the right spot. I go back through the door. and moving those down in the organization. There was recently a Forbes article on Jeff Bezos, and he said, we have hundreds of managers across Amazon and AWS who can green light decisions all day long. In my experience in many companies and at Coca-Cola was there are very few people that could say yes. There are many, many, many people who could say no. But so many fewer that could actually green light a decision and move it forward. And so getting a focus on speed and decision making and calculated risk taking really is, at the end of the day, is what that is, right? Is how comfortable am I with the risk profile of this decision at the end of the day. And then the third principle that I want to call out to you because I really like it at Amazon, it is a culture of if you disagree, come to the table and bring your disagreement. Now, you should be fact-based, but come to the table with your disagreement. And that comes with the culture where we write all these documents. You've, I'm sure, heard about the fact that we write a lot. And you come into the room and you read whatever the paper is for the topic. So two things I like about that. There's a meeting. You're going to discuss a topic. There's a paper that's been written. There's not the expectation that you've read it before the meeting. So I never had time. My calendar was on the half hour. There was no way I was going to read before a meeting. So you come in and you read the document and you give comment and disagree with what's in the document, particularly if you have data that you can contradict what has been written in the document. So fact-based, respectful, but disagreement. Get it on the table. But once we decide, you commit. And I had the experience throughout my career of things I thought we had decided that got unmade later. And that's such a frustrating process and kills speed and kills empowerment. And so getting to a place where when you decide to go is a huge factor for creating a new culture. So these three, as well as the other 11 of the Amazon leadership principles, are what drive the culture. And it really is, after being in industry and in a large corporation where I knew how to get decisions made, I knew everybody. I come to Amazon and I don't know anybody. I know a handful of people. And I'm able to get decisions made faster was a stark contrast to me. So it's something to think about as you embark on your journey and think about your culture. What are the barriers? It may not be decision-making in your organization. You may have that figured out, but what are the barriers to speed? What are the barriers to innovation? What do you need to change in your culture to create the culture that you want, to create the culture that takes you into the future? And that's the thing that, as I talk to customers, I hear a wide range of stories of what the barriers are, but getting clear on those and actually having a plan to address them is huge. But of course, it's, Amazon is somewhat unique, but I do want to now share another customer story from James Smith. Please come to the stage.
Morning all. We'll do that again. Morning all. Very good. Thank you for warming them up. So it's been a long session this morning. I hope you've got a lot from it. I've just got a few minutes now to take you through where Nationwide is at in this journey. I guess what I want to take from this, we are not as far through as, say, Coca-Cola is in this, but I think we're about a year into it, and there's a few things that we've learned, and hopefully you can take something away from this. Before we get into the story, let's do a quick background on Nationwide. It will be a brand familiar to many of you. Roughly about a quarter of you in the room will be members, for which I clearly thank you. It was a business that was started about 130 years ago, so similar to Coca-Cola, and it was started with one aim. It's to improve the living conditions of everyday people. And its purpose then is the same as its purpose now. Okay, is to look after our members. We are a pretty simple business. We offer a safe home for people's savings, a safe place to do everyday banking, and we take those savings and we lend them out to allow people to buy their homes. Okay, simple. We are today the world's largest building society, and the reason we are successful is that we have kept changing, adapting to our members' needs while staying true to our core purpose. Okay? And I think this question of adaptation is really interesting. Through that 130 years, there have been particular points where the rate of change has accelerated. In the past, that's been through political events or economic events. Our firm belief right now is that this is a technology-driven change, and we are now moving into seismic levels of change. And I could have picked any number of different examples, but both within financial services and outside of financial services, there are organizations out there who are responding really well to that change. And as an organization, we've realized that unless we also respond, we will find an increasing gap between our members' expectations and what we're able to deliver. And the interesting thing is, when you look at these organizations or any others that are really embracing this change, the key thing that sits behind it, the thing that's powering it, is this concept of platform. So, what's our challenge? To create a digital platform that accelerates both the how and the what. The how and the what's really, really important to us. The thing I'll keep banging on at my team about incessantly, pace and quality, pace and quality. And it's interesting, those concepts have come through in quite a few of the presentations this morning. Everything that we do needs to drive pace and needs to drive quality. Okay? And the two angles that we're going at, which I'll dip into a wee bit today, is then what's the technology stack that we create that supports that? And then, more importantly, what's the culture that we need and the team we need to wrap around this that we can really take advantage of that? And it's only really when you've got those two components in place that you'll get that multiplier effect that will really allow you to then do that on the acceleration curve. So let's dip into the technology. We needed a tech platform that was secure. We talked about security a lot this morning. It was resilient. It was scalable. We have the same challenges around the peakiness that Phil was talking about. We will see sudden spikes in demand with people logging on to check balances or making payments. And we need to be able to respond to that without having to do lots of physical build. So we need resilient. But we also need to keep an eye on operational costs. Okay? For us, Amazon was the right platform, and the key thing for us actually when making that decision is that we could get going really quickly, both through the commercial process, but also in terms of what we deployed. We started with two simple journeys. Again, a lot of common themes coming through. How do you get some runs on the board? How do you get some successes? Success breeds success. You can invest more and then carry on. And that's very much the journey that we've been on. So we've went with Amazon, we built out what we needed, but we only built what we needed. We had a view about what the proverbial North Star would look like, but we accepted that the only thing about that was probably wrong. But we started to move along that journey. We built the capabilities that we needed for those journeys. We went live, we got success, and we've kept iterating it. And we're treating the platform itself as a product. Okay? So we have a product owner, we have a tech lead, we have someone, an architect, and we're really driving this as a product because we think it's going to be at the kernel of our transformation story. And then we move on to the people side. Again, it's been said already, right? This is the hard bit. The technology is hard, but it's sort of determinately hard. You know broadly what you need to do. This is hard. I've got about 1,500 or 1,600 people that work for me. And they're good, right? They're good at delivering change in a certain way. Some of you will be familiar with Simon Wardley, the concept of pioneers and settlers and town planners. And I like that. We use that analogy quite a lot because I think what it does is it doesn't castigate any one as being bad. Okay? Nothing's inherently bad. These are good people doing a good job. But what I think we've got is we have over-skewed towards town planning. We have optimized the tools and the process for getting stuff done in a certain way. And if we try to just double down on that, we will grind into a lot of the problems that have been spoken about already. So we need to then retrain ourselves into becoming more pioneers and settlers and making sure we've got that right balance between all three. Because again, that's when you get that real innovation driving new ideas, new propositions, and then the town planning to then work out how we can really then get value from it. We were aware of this risk, that need, that muscle memory that will sort of revert back to old was really strong in our team. So when we spun up these first teams, we massively invested in coaching, in external support, in training. We hand-picked individuals from the organisation to drop into these teams. And it wasn't about what they knew, because frankly, nobody in Nationwide had a huge amount of experience in doing this type of change, but it was the attitude. It was the have-a-go-ness. It was the ability to be quite resilient. It was the ability to be almost kind of preachers. We needed people who could really go out there and tell a story about why what we're doing was the right thing to do. And then the other thing is that we then need to get real strong top-level support. As soon as we had the first little problem, we knew there would be a really strong temptation to go back to kind of old ways of doing it, and we've tried to resist that. So I was trying to think, what could I do to distill that would sort of transcend industries and organizations? And I think these are the three things. I'm just going to drill into probably one of them right now, which is the big one, which is the do it for me and I can do it myself. In the old world, if you were a developer, you would have sat back and waited, and an environment would have been provisioned for you at some point. It probably would have been wrong. You would have gone around some loops to get it fixed. We've now turned that on its head. People can spin up environments in a matter of minutes, but the developers have got the environments. There's no team to refer to. They need to look after it themselves. So that puts the responsibility back onto them, which they love, but it does change the nature of the debate and the types of skills that you need. In terms of results, I had to have a bragging slide up here. Listen, we're quite early. We're about a year into this. We've got a long way to go, but already we have made some real material gains. So if you're going through a remortgage, so moving a mortgage to Nationwide, the online process before, it was challenging, okay? It was about 300 bits of data. It would have taken you about an hour on average. We've taken that down to 15 minutes, and the only reason we've been able to do that was because we could start with customer in. What is the customer trying to do? What's the member trying to do? Okay, and we could then engineer out all those little bits of friction that's allowed us to take this down to 15 minutes. Last night we went live with a new feature, which is lucky for this morning, where we put an OCR solution into the system. So you can now upload a pay slip, proof of earnings. That takes a process that would have taken a couple of weeks down to about 15 minutes. That is truly revolutionary, and that's the sort of change that we can deliver. Scalability, when the base rate changed back in the summer, a whole bunch of people wanted to remortgage to get certainty. We dealt with a 500% spike in applications without a blip. And again, that's really important for us. And then the speed to execution. Idea to live in 2 days. The thing that absolutely killed us before was how long it would take us to get stuff through the machine. And when you look at each individual bit of the process, it made perfect sense in of itself, whether it was the legal bit or the commercial bit or the IT bit or the information security bit, but it killed us. And all the things that we spoke about in terms of taking what was ostensibly a good idea, but it was a massive punt if you wanted to do it full tilt. We've been able to take that right down, get it to live, and then at 2 days, the cost is so marginal. There's just essentially, we talked about it earlier on, essentially marginal zero cost for getting something live to then build confidence to then when to scale. So in terms of what next, as I said, we're a year in. We've got a pretty ambitious 2 to 3 year plan that will ultimately end up in a completely transformed digital proposition for Nationwide, which I think makes it a pretty interesting place to develop a career and a great place for our members to do business with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. That was a great story. And again, a focus on speed. And if you take nothing else away from today, figuring out how to infuse speed into your organization, into your culture, a bias for action, as we call it at Amazon, it is critical to your transformation journey. You know, I had the opportunity to leverage a burning platform to get Coca-Cola moving. If you don't have one, as I said earlier, maybe you want to create one, but you need to be bold and take a bold step to get your organization moving and to maintain momentum. And the other piece of advice in closing out today is don't overanalyze it. We have, I think, as enterprises, sometimes a bad habit of going into a planning project for a year, paying a consulting firm a couple $1 million. It may have happened at Coke once or twice. And nothing started. You're a year later, and all you have is a plan. This is a world where you just need to begin. Pick that project, as Chris said at the front. Pick a project, gain some experience, train your staff, and get moving. The world will not wait for you. Hopefully you enjoyed our session this morning. I'm excited about the day that we have in store for you. Have a great day and afternoon.